Hi guys, we've heard many stories over the years of people who have changed their minds on Brexit. Some because their businesses had been impacted, others because they realised that they would not be richer following the lies of Farage, Mogg and Johnson when they promised sunlit uplands. Some may have thought that their vote would deliver a bloody nose to the Tories, only to see May, Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak in charge. However, there have been some Brexit journeys that have required voters to confront perhaps the reason why they voted to leave. The reality of immigration, for example, and not the one sold by the likes of the Daily Mail, the Sun or the Express. Here a caller named Emma explains to James O'Brien why her Brexit voting uncle changed his mind.
My Brexit voting uncle unfortunately got leukemia just before Christmas, and so spent a lot of time. And when I went to visit him, he said it's really opened his eyes to immigration and the NHS. And he's done a 180.
Really?
He wants to get the Tories out after the election. He said he had so much fun chatting to them all about the nationalities and how they celebrate Christmas traditionally, and it was...
So just literally clocking, because, I mean, you know, quite if you're dealing with doctors and nurses, from a patient's point of view, it becomes clear, I'd have thought, quite quickly if people are from overseas. And so just curiosity and human interest broke down barriers that had been put up by years of, presumably, political and media brainwashing.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had many discussions with different politically.
But where you failed, these doctors and nurses succeeded.
And young doctors and nurses as well. They're all, when I went to visit them, they're all younger foreign nurses and doctors, and it really enjoyed spending time and chatting with them.
I only asked that question as an afterthought, but what a fascinating insight. And how is he? Is his leukemia under control? Is he?
Oh, yeah, absolutely brilliant. Honestly, he was literally diagnosed on the Tuesday morning, and he was receiving treatment Tuesday afternoon in hospital.
And listen, NHS has got a whole heap of problems at the moment, largely as a consequence of very deliberate political policies pursued over the last 14 years. But the minute we lose our sense of gratitude towards the people who are keeping it afloat, wherever they come from, because of course 2/3 will be British born, but a third aren't, I can see. I mean, I don't know what the alternative would be for Emma's uncle, be Colin's mate.
It's wonderful that Emma's uncle is getting the treatment he needs, and I hope he makes a full recovery. It's sad that before the referendum there was, I don't know if it was Vote Leave or Leave EU or whichever it was, but they ran a political campaign where it included a video regarding the NHS, and it was in the EU and outside the EU. And of course, outside the EU, they sold this idea that everything would be wonderful. There'd be no waiting lists. You'd be able to get a GP. You wouldn't have to queue. The service level would be much higher. And people bought that. People believed that leaving the European Union would mean there'd be fewer foreigners, so British people would be able to access NHS services in a much better way. Not understanding that so many foreign workers are in the NHS. The NHS relies so much on non-British workers. Doctors, nurses, carers, people cleaning, admin staff. So many people from outside the UK work in the NHS. And the public had been brainwashed, as James O'Brien points out here, by the likes of Mogg and Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson, but also the old media, the Express newspaper, the Sun, the Daily Mail, but also, as we're seeing now with new media, for example, GB News or other right-wing talk shows, trying to convince people that the problem is immigration once again, when the NHS relies so much on immigration. And when freedom of movement ended, we saw what happened. Doctors and nurses from the NHS returned to their country in Europe and didn't come back. And now the NHS is desperately in need of something like 150,000 nurses. And the care sector is relying on a smaller pool of workers as well. They have to pay huge amounts of money to get the visas necessary to bring people in from outside the European Union. Now, the story here, the personal story here, is of a man who voted for Brexit. I don't know the full reason. It wasn't fully explained here, but it's possible it was in regards to immigration, and he changed his mind because he met immigrants. He met foreigners. Maybe this is the solution. People who still think Brexit was a good idea just need to meet foreigners. Maybe they need to go into hospital and realize, actually, it's a good idea to have foreigners. They're not our enemy. They're not the problem. Perhaps the problem is the people at the top, the people who are not funding the NHS sufficiently. Maybe the problem is the right-wing media who continually tell us immigrants are the problem, foreigners are the problem. Maybe it's if the owners of these media outlets actually paid their taxes in Britain, things would be a little bit better. So it's great that Emma was called in and explained this, because I think this is just one story, but I think there are many stories like this. People who maybe had one position on immigration before the referendum, met foreigners, met people from the European Union, but also outside the European Union, and then realised, actually, these people are not the horrid individuals that the media present them as. Perhaps they're actually human after all. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.